All right, let's dive right in. We're going to explore this really profound challenge that was laid down in the Quran over 1400 years ago. It's a challenge that, honestly, it gets right to the heart of our relationship with life, with death, and what our purpose here even is. But here's the really wild part. This ancient text, it speaks directly to some of the most cutting-edge science happening today. You're going to see what I mean. Let's get started. So this right here, this is the verse at the absolute core of our story. It's such a direct, almost daring challenge. Think about what it's saying. It's basically like, okay, if you're so sure that you, and only you, have a one-way ticket to paradise, then you shouldn't be afraid of what comes next, right? In fact, you should be eager for it. It's this one single provocative idea that kicks off everything we're going to talk about. Okay, so here's the plan. First, we're going to unpack the history behind this wild challenge. Then, we'll get into the psychology of why people might fear death, even when they say they're ready. Next up, and this is cool, we'll connect this ancient wish for a 1,000-year life to modern science. Then we'll ask, what's a real life of purpose? And finally, we'll see what happens when a message is just too hard to hear. All right, first up, a divine, daring challenge. To really get this, we need to understand the context. We have to go back in time, to the city of Medina. This challenge wasn't just thrown out into the void, it was delivered in a place that was absolutely buzzing with religious and political tension. And that context is key. So, who was this challenge actually for? Well, it was aimed at some of the Jewish tribes living in Medina at the time. See, they really struggled with the Prophet Muhammad's message. For them, they believed that divine guidance was something exclusive to their own people, their own lineage. It had been that way for generations. So the very idea of a prophet coming from an Arab tribe, well, that just didn't fit their worldview at all. It was a major shakeup. And this gets us to a really important idea called asabiya. You can think of it as a kind of intense, deep-seated tribalism. It's that ride-or-die loyalty to your own group, your own people, sometimes to the point where it becomes a prejudice against anyone outside that group. A huge part of the message of Islam was to try and break this down. The argument was, hey, truth is truth no matter who it comes from. It was a call to shift your loyalty away from just your tribe and towards truth itself. Okay, so let's talk about the fear of what's next. It leads to the big question, right? If you're 100% convinced you're the chosen ones and paradise is waiting, why on earth wouldn't you take that deal? Why not wish for death and go claim your prize? The fact that they refused says so much about what was really going on inside. And then the Quran gives this really fascinating insight. It says they will never wish for it. Not just they might not, but never. And the reason given isn't just, a normal love of life or survival instinct. No, it's because of what their hands have put forth. That's a powerful phrase, and it hints that there's something else going on here, something much deeper. This really lays out the huge contradiction, doesn't it? On one hand, you've got the claim, we have exclusive access to the higher life, the Allah, the great beyond. But then you look at their actions, the reality, and what do you see? This intense, desperate clinging to the lower life, right here on earth, the Adna. These two things just don't add up. So what gives? Well, it all comes down to guilt. That phrase we heard earlier, what their hands have put forth, it's talking about their actions, their injustices, their sins. So their fear of death wasn't just a simple fear of the unknown. It was a fear of having to answer for the things they had done. It was a fear of accountability. All right, now we get to the quest for 1,000 years. This is where this ancient story suddenly feels incredibly modern. Because this desire to just cling to life, to put off the end for as long as possible, that's not just some old story. It's a universal human obsession that's more alive today than ever. And the Quran just nails this human tendency. It says that some people love this life so much, one of them wishes that he could be granted a life of 1,000 years. I mean, it's such a timeless observation, isn't it? That deep down desire for more time, more life, no matter what. Okay, and this is where the past and the future just collide. It's amazing. That observation from 1,400 years ago about wanting to live for 1,000 years, that is now the actual stated goal of some of the most advanced scientific research happening right now. I'm not kidding. Scientists are literally trying to make that wish a reality. So how on earth are they even trying to do this? Well, in a nutshell, it's about reprogramming our DNA. They're using some really complex methods, like tinkering with something called the methylation process, which is basically like a biological clock in our cells, and they're trying to reset it, to turn it back. And get this, it's not just science fiction. Researchers have already managed to reverse the biological age of human skin cells in a lab by 30 years. That ancient wish, it's now a full-blown scientific quest. But hold on. Right after making this observation about wanting a long life, the Quran makes a really important pivot. It kind of says, look, focusing on the quantity of your years is missing the entire point. The real question isn't how long do you live, it's how do you live. It's all about a life of purpose. And this brings up another big idea, khilafah. You can think of it as vicegerency or stewardship. The concept is that we humans weren't just put here to, well, exist. We're put here to be God's representatives on Earth, that we have a mission to fulfill. It totally shifts the focus from just passively surviving to actively making a meaningful contribution. So what does that kind of purposeful, righteous life actually look like? Well, it's way more than just personal worship. Of course, faith in God is there, but it's also about acquiring knowledge, about building your character. And here's the kicker that often gets missed. It's about contributing to progress. It's about actively working to make the world a better, more just, more advanced place for everybody. And this leads to a pretty radical conclusion when you think about it. From this perspective, a short life that ends in a truly meaningful way, say in the fight for justice or by saving someone's life, is actually seen as more valuable, more desirable than a super long but ultimately empty and selfish life. In a way, the quality of your death is seen as a reflection of the quality of your life. Okay, let's move to our final section. What happens when the message is unpopular? So what do people do when they're faced with a truth that they just can't argue with, but they also really, really don't want to accept? Well, you fall back on a tactic that's as old as time. You attack the messenger. If you can't win the argument on the facts, you try to discredit the person who's delivering the facts. It's a classic diversion tactic, right? A way to avoid facing a truth that makes you uncomfortable. And that's precisely what happened back in Medina. According to the text, the tribes completely shifted their argument. They started claiming that the angel Gabriel had made a mistake. They said the message was supposed to go to someone from their tribe. They couldn't refute the message, so they literally blamed the divine mailman for delivering it to the wrong address. And that brings us full circle, right back to the central question. This whole story, the challenge, the fear of death, the desire for a long life, the deflections, it all forces us to ask ourselves a really fundamental question. You know, modern science might just get us that 1,000-year life one day, but this ancient text is asking us, maybe we should first figure out what to do with the handful of years we've already got. If just living a long time isn't the point, then what is? And that's a question for every single one of us to think about.